Hi. Can you hear me okay?
I can now, yeah.
Okay, great. How are you getting on with Mighty Writer?
So I am a newbie to it. I'm yet to use it, but my colleague who's also joining us has used it a little bit already. So
Okay,
I'm in
great. Hello.
EYFS and
Hi.
Megan's year one. So
Okay,
I'm literally wanting to kind of hear, I've watched all the videos,
okay.
but I'd really like to just hear people from EYFS to see how they're using it, what kind of thing they've done, whether it's small groups, whole class.
Yeah.
Just a bit of sort of something to kind of get me started, I think.
Okay, fine. And you can have, other training as well separately to this if you want me to go over things with you. I mean, last week there was a really good number of people, so it's nice to have a conversation. It just depends how many people come on because it's coming up to Christmas, people might be busy. So
No
how are you
problem.
getting on with it, Megan?
Yeah, it's okay. So I had that training with you originally, and I started
Yeah.
off doing really well with it, and then now I feel like I've kind of got a bit flat with it. I think 'cause
Okay.
I've already got like previous planning from things I've done before, so I kind of gone onto the structure. It's like getting it to fit alongside that. I think I was saying to you before about having it to come in line with that. I think
Yeah,
the children
okay.
really take to it, and they really like it, but
Yeah.
I think it's just making it fit. I feel like I was going really well, and then I kind of just lost. I introduced
Okay.
adjectives, and then I've kind of lost what I'm doing with it a bit.
Okay, that's fine. So, I mean, we can chat about that anyway. We can have a chat about that. So I'll do sort of a main thing. I'm focusing on sort of letter writing today and how you can use it for that. And then I don't know whoever else is on here, if you want to um Miss Mallet, do you want to hi?
Hi.
Hi, how are you getting on with it?
Yeah, we're relatively new. So basically, we're sat in our head teacher's office,
Right.
and I'm lucky enough, my sister's a school teacher as well.
Yeah.
And she had inspection come in. So I went in and seen it. She got it out, and I was like, oh, wow. It's very similar to Pi Corbett. I like the
Yeah.
story maps
Yeah.
element, but mine really struggle with writing sentences. They use that as it stops at what's next.
Okay.
So I've used it for we're doing instructions at the moment. So I've used it as a visual for that.
Yeah.
And I really like the what we call, your openers, your sentence starters.
Yes.
That the fact that they're there, it reminds them of the capital letters because they're not taught that through their phonics.
Yeah.
But what I'm finding is they're drawing the picture still. Maybe I'm pushing to writing too early.
Yeah.
When they're still drawing the picture instead
Okay.
of writing the word
Okay.
instead.
Yeah, okay. So what I'll do then is I'm just going to go through. I mean, this might answer some of your questions. The focus today is kind of letter writing and how you can use Mighty Writer for that. So I've made a few notes of things that I think are quite important. And then once I've finished that, we can talk more generally and I can sort of answer specific questions, or you two can talk together as well about your experiences. And that's that's what this is for. So in terms of letter writing, the fact is that we need to improve children's communication and social skills and their ability to choose appropriate vocabulary. So obviously that goes for any genre you are teaching. We need them to be able to write for a wide range of purposes and to be able to structure their writing, in conjunction with this. So as you know anyway, children's spoken language needs to come first. So as teachers, I feel we need to give children the opportunity to have conversations. So we need to promote those conversations and give them opportunity for talk. But we are a language model for children. Hi, everybody. We're a language model for children. So it's not only essential, but a fantastic way by using Mighty Writer to encourage children's understanding of the way sentences are structured and appropriate vocabulary choices in preparation for them becoming independent writers. So I'm able to use Mighty Writer to model any genre, even if it's very informally during a story time. So children are just seeing that vocabulary being modelled to them, and often, you know, vocabulary that they are not using, that things that they're hearing in stories anyway. But I've got that opportunity to use Mighty Writer to sort of visualize that for them. So obviously letter writing, as a genre, you know, that we teach is one way that helps support the development of children's ideas and their ability to organise these ideas effectively. Letter writing, I think, is particularly good because it provides children with a genuine purpose and audience for their writing. So it's highly effective in terms of motivating children. But before we ask children to write letters, we can have spent a significant amount of time modelling this in our own storytelling, like I was just saying, you know, using the Mighty Writer mat. So even before we teach specific concepts, children are already very familiar with key ideas because of the exposure to it from an early age. So they have seen me, you know, write a letter to the head teacher using this, and that's right from reception. I'm not talking about lots and lots of sentences. It's just maybe one sentence for the introductory paragraph, one for the middle, one for the end. But they're seeing me select different sentence starters. They're seeing me add in adjectives. They're seeing me go back and change my mind on a, you know, very basic level. But actually, the skills that once they're doing that for themselves, they are, you know, competent writers. So the idea is we're kind of drip feeding that information so that it naturally becomes second nature for children. So throughout reception, alongside all the other activities we are doing to teach and embed early literacy skills, using Mighty Writer to model a letter, you know, while the children are just literally passive onlookers, is a fantastic way to introduce children to this genre and the many different sentence structures and types of punctuation. So like I said, you don't have to model many sentences each time, but you can expose them to a wide-ranging vocabulary. And it's quite interesting when you look at, actually, if you take the national curriculum, what it says about teaching the elements of grammar. Obviously, you know, there's quite a lot to cover, but interestingly, it says, you know, it is not designed to constrain or restrict teachers' creativity, but simply to provide the structure on which they can construct exciting lessons. And I think that is really important. You know, the national curriculum is not, it's not going to make it difficult to make it exciting. And I think we can still, as teachers, have full control of that creativity. And with Mighty Writer, the idea is that you are covering all the aspects of SPAG that you need to, but in a very visual and practical way for children that enables them to understand it and start to apply it independently. So, you know, whatever we do, it's what you're doing anyway. You know, we need to make it fun and we need to make it relaxed, and we need to help everything, you know, make sense for children. So they always see the purpose in what they're doing, and so that they're motivated to want to write. And I think the key for us as teachers is always to think, you know, what is the reason we are teaching this? So when you're looking at your planning, think, oh, today, you know, it's poetry, today it's letter writing, you know, why are we actually doing those things? And it's taking that long-term view, you know, and if we're getting excited about it and what we can achieve, then so do the children. So you're not really looking at each genre separately. You're thinking, right, with letter writing, I have got an opportunity to model a whole range of different sentence starters. I've got an opportunity to model, you know, capital letters, full stops, capital letters for pronouns, you know, all those sorts of things. And you can also model, you know, and as a conjunction, adjectives, suffixes, commas in lists. You know, the list is endless, and it does go well beyond year 2. So even for your more able writers, you are able to model that really clearly, you know, for the genre of letter writing. So if we just take, you know, writing to Father Christmas as an example and how you might use Mighty Writer to do that, the idea is, yes, as you will have seen if you've been using Mighty Writer a lot, you obviously have the planning sheets where children are given the time to kind of organise their ideas and really think carefully about that sentence structure. But you're not just limited to that. You know, as a teacher, you are allowed to be as creative as you want to. So you can model on here, get children excited about language, get children excited about word choice, get children understanding of sentence starters, you know, all the things you're wanting to introduce them to. You can model it on here, they can see you edit, revise ideas, but you can do as many different kinds of creative activities as you want to, you know, describing, you know, Lapland, whatever it is, to get children really knowing their subject and knowing what they want to say, so they really do know what they want to talk about. So, for example, if I was doing a letter to Father Christmas and we're modelling that in the classroom, you know, I might start off by reading a book like you would do anyway. So, you know, Dear Father Christmas by Alan Durrant is really good because it's letters, you know, to Father Christmas, from Father Christmas, and that exposes children to lots of, you know, the content, you know, what do they actually want to talk about, the questions, the exclamation marks. You know, all the kinds of things you just want them to be aware of, and then you can start, you know, specifically modelling it. So you can do everything you normally do, thought shower those ideas, and you can build up to it really carefully using Mighty Writer. And where somebody was just saying at the beginning about you know, using Mighty Writer to develop their understanding of sort of adjectives, and you know, I think it's really a case of taking it really slowly. So if children are still spending time on pictures and things like that, it's just thinking to ourselves, we don't want to rush children on too much. You know, do they really know what a sentence is? Do they really understand it has a capital letter? Do they know what they want to say? Can they hear where that full stop goes? You know, does it make sense? Because obviously there's lots of things over time we're wanting them to start doing, you know, expanded noun phrases, increasingly adventurous adjectives, you know, but that does come quite quickly once they really do understand a sentence and understand how to organize those ideas. And I think you can't really spend, you know, I think if a child needs to spend time just on one sentence, arranging it, changing their mind, that is very powerful for them because they've really taken that on board for themselves. You know, they are doing that independently. So if I was using Mighty Writer to do a letter, I wouldn't necessarily do it all in one morning. You know, I would be doing this over time. So I might do that, like the introduction on Monday morning, you know, the middle paragraph on Tuesday, the end paragraph on Wednesday. And I'm not rushing to do lots and lots of sentences. I really am focused on children understanding that I can change my sentence starter. You know, I'm spending a lot of time doing it. I'm doing it very slowly and very carefully because I want children to be going away and really looking at their sentence and understanding actually it's important where I choose to place my adjective. My adjective could go here, it could go here, I could have a comma here, you know, I could have the word and. So they're just spending that time, but they've seen you do it, and they've seen you do it in a very relaxed way, but in a very, very thorough way. So you know, if I was modelling a letter, you know, over here, I'm on a blank, I've just drawn a picture of a house because that is where the address goes. So, you know, that is literally just represents, we have the address, and then that plain one there is for the date. So, you know, it's very, very simple, but it just, you know, children see that and they can just picture that in their mind. That's where I have the address. Here, we've just got dear, and then we've got a picture of Father Christmas, you know, dear Father Christmas, comma. Now here, this is my sort of introductory paragraph. Now, if I was modelling this in reception, just a very basic letter to Father Christmas, not even if I was expecting them to write it, but just to literally have exposure to what a letter is, etc. Or if I was asking the children to start thinking about writing, you know, a letter, but this was my first sort of lesson, I might literally just be doing this one sentence in my introduction. So, I have been good, you know, full stop. And that would literally could be just my first sentence. So they're really getting the idea of what a sentence is, etc. that might build up. So, you know, here I've put, is it snowing in Lapland? Question mark. Luckily, I've been very good, so I'm hoping for presents. So, you know, you can model how to sort of expand those ideas, how to start including a question, you know, to support the sort of the introduction of the letter. And you can make those sentences increasingly detailed, but very slowly. You know, I want to focus on, let's ask Father Christmas a question. Let's be more chatty. Let's extend our introduction. You know, I'm going to add an exclamation mark and talking about how we can do that. And really very carefully building up those sentences so children understand, you know, we're not just necessarily asking for what we want. We can, you know, add structure to that. We can develop the content. You know, we can make it increasingly detailed and think about the way we're changing our sentences around. And you know, that really takes time, because if you do that thoroughly, you don't have to have done many sentences, but children are really getting the idea, you know, I want to ask this question, you know, etc. So here, then we're thinking about the middle paragraph. We've done our introduction. The middle paragraph is where we're going to write what we would like. So, you know, I've got the opportunity to think to the, you know, tell the children what's an appropriate sentence starter. So instead of like, I want, you know, please. And then we've got the opportunity for a list and separating that with commas. So please, can I have a train, a robot, and a ball? So, you know, you've got the opportunity to introduce the word and I can be going through all these things really thoroughly, you know, very, very carefully, so children really know how to use them. You know, will you deliver the presents while I'm asleep? Question mark. So, you know, I've got the opportunity to, over time, make this increasingly sophisticated and just allow children to see me and work together. Well, could we change that? Does that sound, you know, more polite? You know, all the things we're wanting to really encourage them to be able to do, we are able to model, you know, out loud. And then, you know, I've got, if possible, I would also like a shiny new rocket. So, you know, we've got a comma separating two adjectives, you know, if possible, as a sentence starter. So you can start to add those ideas as children go through. And, you know, children are passionate about it. They know what they want to say. And then I think that, you know, it's important for children to then be able to go back and structure, you know, their own letters, but in a very sort of relaxed way, and spend the time talking to each other about those ideas. And this is where I think these are really useful, to enlarge them to A3, so that children are really going through. And I think if they're spending ages on lots of detailed pictures, that's what you want to avoid, because what I'm doing is, on here, I am deliberately modeling very simple pictures. So I'm not worried if children are really thinking carefully about the content. I want their pictures to still be simple, but I'm not really worried about how long it's taking them to draw those. I mean, I don't want lots of detailed pictures, but if those children, when I look at them, they're, you know, and I'm hearing those conversations, that their conversation is purposeful, they're thinking about that word order, you know, they're challenging each other, you know, actually, no, we don't want to say I want, let's have please, you know, and they're kind of starting to take on board the ideas I've modelled, then that's good. I don't mind how long those sentences take them, because they are going through the process for themselves of learning how to write for the purpose of a letter and how to start thinking about that word order. And it's up to me, when I use Mighty Writer, to model, you know, increasingly sophisticated sort of elements. So all the time, you know, I'm going to be prompting children with my questions to extend their thinking. You know, could we ask Father Christmas, you know, a question? So just to get them thinking outside the box, but so that they still have ownership over it. So we need to support children to organise their ideas as effectively as possible. the planning sheets are useful because as different elements of grammar and punctuation are introduced, you know, children can slow down and really learn to think carefully about those word choices and the word order, so that those sentences are increasingly sophisticated. And I think, you know, sometimes it's easy to move children on thinking they've got to do this, they've got to do that. But actually, you know, very quickly, these sentences, you're starting to include absolutely everything they have to cover up to year 2, you know, but you're also easily able to extend them beyond that. So I just think the opportunity we have is to allow children to practice, you know, really embedding those basic skills. And it also allows children to develop an understanding of how to improve their work. So they're not reliant on me to say, right, can you go back and add an adjective? They're already saying, I could add an adjective to that. I can add a comma because, you know, I'm using 2 adjectives, etc. You know, and that is key to developing them as completely independent writers. So from my point of view as a teacher, you know, I'm always asking the question, have they really mastered sentence construction at a basic level before I move on? And then, you know, if they've got all of that, then I'm free to move forward and start to, you know, look at specific things. So I think letter writing is quite a useful way to model, you know, quite a wide variety of grammar and all the kind of things we're looking for. But I would also use this as a storytelling tool at the end of the day to do that. So has anybody got any questions about how they're using it? Any things you're finding difficult, any things that are going well?
What I find quite difficult is when, for example, it's a genre where there's no pictures that match.
Yeah.
So would you be drawing every single picture, or is that okay? Like, you know, you feel like it's just, I don't want to, because you only got so many blanks. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of blanks, isn't there? But you're not having to represent every single word with a picture.
No.
And I think the more you use this, so, you know, like when I'm setting this up for the letter writing today for Father Christmas, I'm just thinking, actually, it's really quite fun because I'm thinking I'm not going to, I don't need to represent every word. You know, here I've got, if possible, you know, so if is representing the whole of that sort of first, you know, that introductory phrase, etc. And I'm just thinking, am I going to represent it with a picture, or am I going to use a verb instead of a picture to, you know, so and then you can sort of have a conversation with the children. Well, is that a verb? Shall we use the verb symbol rather than a picture?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I just didn't know if I was doing it right. I haven't really.
I think you are, but I also,
does that make sense? Like, yeah, I'm just stuck with them making their own stories with your pictures, but I've been doing about like raw, so the Lion King basically kind of text. There's not really that many pictures that would match that. So I think I've just got to get a bit more brave with, because the children will say, we want this picture. You know, they want pictures for everything at the start. I found. Yeah, and but I think it's kind of saying no, like emphasizing the fact that you have a really good memory. So when we do this, we're only going to need like a couple of pictures or this verb, and that will remind us, because I want them to start developing that memory, you know. And I would say don't have more than, say, 2 pictures on a sentence. Initially, I mean, here, you know, I've done 3. I could easily fit that on. It was quite a straightforward sentence because it's sort of a list of the toys. But if you've got no more than 2 pictures, then you can really focus on saying to the children, well, could we add a conjunction in that? Could we add an adjective? And saying, actually, that is a verb, so we could just use the verb symbol. And you're kind of having that conversation out loud, so they're really understanding the part that each word is playing in that sentence. And that's quite helpful for you as the teacher, because you're not having to be up the front saying, this is how we're going to build this sentence. You're kind of all in it together, and it is a conversation with you and the class. How, you know, what a great idea. That's what we want to say, but how's it going to look on here? And the more they see as a class the fact that actually, no, we can change our mind. Does that sound quite right? Actually, no. Then that is what's going to teach them to be able to go away and repeat that, basically. Thank you.
So I don't think you have to worry about getting through lots of sentences either. I do think you can afford to spend the time, even if that was on one sentence, because they've learnt so much about the purpose of that sentence and about the word choice, etc.
Thank you.
Has anybody got anything else to add about, how they're getting on with Mighty Writer? Are you finding it, helpful in terms of any genre you're working on?
I have another question, but I don't want to be the only one talking.
No, that's fine. Please do.
So
that's what it's
children
for.
that I feel like, I don't mean they're beyond it. I've got quite a mix of ability. So I've got children that know what a sentence is. They're almost like they want to be on to the next stage. And I've still got some children that are quite low. So it's just kind of like how I pitch that and like how do I meet the needs of everybody, if that makes sense. Because some are still wanting to draw the pictures, but others don't, are beyond the pictures and they're quite quite able for year one, really.
Okay, fine. Right. So what I would do is I would say when you're working whole class, you're teaching to the tops. So because it's so visual, your lower ability children are still going to be exposed, like from reception where I'm saying, you're using language they're hearing in stories but not yet using for themselves, that sort of policy carries on. So, my lower ability children, even children who are, not even speaking in a sentence, let's say in year one, they are seeing that vocabulary and they've got the visual, support. So I would be adding in for my top year ones, okay, then we're going to start using while, we're going to start using, all these extra conjunctions, all the things you want them to start doing. I would definitely start modeling because they're still seeing it all in the context of a sentence. So I would be teaching to your tops whole class, and then what I would do is when they're going to work independently, I would then adapt my teaching for particular groups of children. So if I've got children who are still not using, more than one sentence starter, or they're not using the conjunction and, then my whole focus with that group would be putting a sentence in the middle. Today we're using the word and I went to the shop and etc. So that you're just able to really specifically focus on what is it that these children are not yet doing independently. What do they need more time doing? And with your lower ability year ones, you could literally cut these sentences down. So if they were sitting around the mat with me, I might give them one of these each on a clipboard. And so as a group, we're making up a sentence together, and then they're going to have a go at planning one on their own because they're with me. They're not necessarily having to work in pairs. They're, we're modeling it and then they're having a go. So you can really match it to make sure that they haven't got those gaps.
And then would they move on to when they move on to the writing?
Yeah.
So then want to write. So like maybe keep that lower group on the pictures, and then the group that are ready to write have them writing. Does that make sense?
So on this, it depends. Like with your top year ones, okay, what I would be tempted to do is think if when you're looking at their writing, it's a case of thinking, right, how sophisticated are their sentences? Are they, for example, starting to use fronted adverbials in their writing? I know they're not expected to, but what I mean is how advanced are they? Because whatever you want them to start doing, they don't have to necessarily draw lots of pictures. What you're saying to them is you need to plan on here and think about that word also. So they're really slowing down and thinking, okay, then if I'm starting to use this conjunction, this is how it could go into the sentence. If I'm starting to use 3 adjectives, I'm going to need a comma, I might need the word and, so that they're really slowing down and able to build increasingly sophisticated sentences. It might be, a couple of years above where they are, but they've had that chance to really slow down. And I think that is the purpose. It's not that, because some children will be able, this would hold them back. I know what you're saying in terms of, they're naturally able to take on board new ideas. They can visualize those words, they organize them, and they're doing it. And for some children, they won't need that and it could slow them down. But, increasingly, as I speak to more and more teachers, I think so many children, they need that time just to really think about that word order and those word choices. and to go back and to, you know, and to check it. How could I improve it? Could I add an adjective? Could I add an adverb? And if they're really doing all those things, then they are writers, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I think the purpose of this is really, you know, getting those sentences just increasingly sophisticated, not worrying about lots and lots of them, but do they really understand how to use those words in context, you know, in a purposeful way?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions at all?
I would just say, like to say, that's where I was finding it difficult. I got very low children who were still very basic sentence structuring, and then I got my top children who, like you said, I was trying to add adjectives to their sentences, but what I was getting then was my bottom children were drawing stars, but they didn't understand, they weren't ready for that yet.
Yeah, so I would do those children then, they need more practical work with this. So what I would be doing, you know, I would, you know, if you've seen the training video, or then you know, you don't necessarily need those sentences initially. I would just use the pictures, so you've really got them understanding that if they've got a series of, even if it's just 3 pictures, and they're able to connect those pictures, and we've made up, you know, a short sentence, could they go back and add an adjective in? You know, so it's getting them to start thinking, I can improve that by taking a start and putting it above that picture, so that they are starting that, you know, and that is when they are starting to be independent, because they've recognized that they could improve that sentence by adding a star. And once they've done that physically, then they've got the idea of how to review and how to improve it. Because once they've overcome that and they're seeing that actually I can make these words more interesting, I can make what I want to say more interesting, I can portray my ideas more accurately to the reader by that kind of vocabulary, then, you know, it all starts to make sense when you're putting it into a more structured sentence. But I think you know, at whatever point you think that's where they start to struggle, it's thinking, well, why are they struggling? What is their gap? And that's what we need to just go back. Because once they've got that foundation, they can start to add in all these extra things very, very easily. But it's really teaching children about building that sentence from scratch every single time for whatever genre. Is that helpful? Have you got any other questions, or does anybody feel like they need more training or anything for their schools, or is everybody else getting on okay?
I think we were just kind of discussing that you're going to give it a go, aren't you, Katie?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a go.
And then we might need to come back for a bit more training. Maybe the two of us together. And we
that's fine.
And see how it's going in EYFS. We could kind of together, if that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, has today given you a bit more of an idea? Obviously, this is only focusing on sort of letter writing, but do you see how you could?
Yeah, I think really what I might try and do is, because I have such a widespread of ability and a lot of speech and language issues and concerns. So I think really what I might do is just start, like you said, with just having maybe 2 pictures or even 1, and just saying, you know, what could we say about it, and just focusing on the language they're using and how they construct that sentence, and you model a sentence and sort of try and just play a game almost with it about and take away all the writing element and just focus on
Exactly, and what a sentence is and how it has meaning. And what I would do is I would also do that outside of the literacy hour, because it's all about just drip feeding this and making it easier for you and them. So what I might say is literally twice a day, once at lunchtime when everyone's washing their hands, and once at the end of the day before we go home. It might even be as simple as this. I might have the whole board blank. I might just get one blank green sentence and put it in the middle. And And then I might say to somebody, right, can you choose a sentence starter? And I can deliberately have quite a range up there. It doesn't matter, even if they can't read it, who cares? They just take it off and stick it in front of the sentence. Somebody could choose 2 pictures. Somebody can choose the full stop. Right, what could that sentence say? And then straight away, we've got a base. Does it make sense? How could we improve it? Somebody might say, no, can we change that picture? Somebody might say, could we change the sentence starter? I might say to them, how could we make that into a question? So I'm going through loads of things. Could you add an adjective? What would a verb be? You know, so literally I'm covering a tremendous amount, but I'm doing that every day. Now, that might only take me literally 3 minutes, but nobody's going wrong. And we don't know what sentence we're going to come up with because they're in charge, but you know, straight away I'm exposing them to loads of different sentence starters. Meanwhile, you know, and suddenly they're starting to use that in their sentences because they've got excited about what they know they can now do. Those words are not out of their reach. You know, I am immediately, my expectation is actually very high. So I'm allowing them and I'm wanting them to use that vocabulary. You know, I'm not going to hold them back. If these children still can't speak in a sentence, you know, they're not going to be held back. I'm still going to let them use very complicated vocabulary, even if they don't know what it says, because then they're proud. You thought of that sentence. What a fantastic sentence.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would do that as much, you know, find the time in the day, literally 2 minutes, because you've got enough going on. But what I mean is that can massively impact your literacy teaching.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I've got to focus on introducing and as a conjunction, I'm going to make sure I've modelled that at the end of the day in my storytelling time. So when I come to teach it in literacy, they've already seen it. So those lower ability year ones, they already know they're not at a disadvantage.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, thanks for your input. You know, if you've got more questions, if you want a bit more training, you can just go on the website and, you know, you can do that at a time that suits you. You know, you can have as much training as you want to.
Thank you. You'll probably see it again.
Yeah, that's fine. No problem at all.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.